Hello and welcome to the Burrow. This is the third video in our series on the Burrows and Badgers skirmish game. In this video we're going to be taking a look at movement, covering all the ways you can get your models around the tabletop. Movement's a key part of the game. While there isn't a move action, most of the actions a model can perform will involve one or more moves. As we discussed in the first video, all of a character's statistics are represented by a polyhedral dice. And normally, when you use one of your stats, you have to roll the dice. But movement's slightly different. You don't always have to roll. I'll explain that in a moment. Now, whenever a model moves horizontally, you use the move stat. When a model moves vertically, you use the nimbleness stat. And as I said, those stats are represented by dice. For example, you might have a move of d6 or a nimbleness of d8. But for all moves in normal open terrain, you don't need to roll the dice. You just treat it as if you'd rolled the highest possible number and move up to that many inches. So with a move of d8, you can move up to 8 inches when moving over open terrain. A model performing an action that involves a move can turn freely. You can be moved horizontally in any direction, a distance in inches equal or less than its movement statistic die type. A model may be moved vertically up or down a ladder, stairs or rope, a distance equal to or less than its nimbleness statistic. Now remember, no rolls are required for this. You don't have to roll the dice. You simply move a distance up to the highest number the die could have rolled. So again, 6 inches from a movement stat of 6. And that is one move. You can turn freely. You can move up to the distance that your movement or nimbleness stat would allow. However, certain types of terrain are classed as difficult and they present more of a challenge. If the terrain piece features a broken or irregular surface or represents water or vegetation, let's say you're going through trees or the like, or across a marsh, then that terrain is classed as difficult. For horizontal movement over difficult terrain, then the acting model would roll its movement statistic dice and move a number of inches up to the amount they roll on the dice. For vertical movement over difficult terrain, say if you're climbing something that doesn't have a ladder or a rope or steps or anything like that, then you have to roll the acting model's nimbleness dice and then move up to the number rolled in inches. If your model is climbing a vertical surface but doesn't have enough movement to get all the way up or down, then simply make a note of how far up it is and place the model at the bottom of that bit of terrain. Then next turn you can continue your movement from where you left off previously. Moving between models. If you want to move between two models on the tabletop, or say between a model and a piece of terrain, you can only do so if there's enough space for your model's base to fit through. If there isn't enough space to get through, you'll have to go around. Mixing open and difficult terrain movement. When a model starts their move in open terrain but wants to enter difficult terrain during the move, they can do that by moving at their normal full movement rate until they hit the difficult terrain. Then when you hit the edge of the difficult terrain, you roll your movement die. And what you do is you subtract the distance you've already moved, rounding any partial inches down, from the dice roll. Anything you've got left is the number of inches you can move through that difficult terrain. If you're making a move that already starts in difficult terrain, though, all you do is roll your movement dice as if you're moving through difficult terrain, and that's how far you can move that turn. Even if you reach the edge of the difficult terrain and want to keep moving, you've got your set amount there. Now that covers the basics of movement, but there is stuff that happens on rare occasions, depending on how your terrain's set up, depending on how your game's going. For example, you might want to move horizontally and vertically in the same move. Say if you've moved up to a wall and you want to climb it as fast as you can. You can do that. You can combine horizontal and vertical movement in the same move, but the total distance moved cannot be more than either your move stat or your nimbleness stat, whichever is lower. So that's how you figure it out. Whichever one's lower, you use that one. If it's difficult terrain, then it's the same deal, but you have to roll the dice. So whichever was lower, your move dice or your nimbleness dice, you'd roll that one, and that's the total distance you can move that turn. Low terrain features. Now, you're going to find occasionally on your tabletop Small bits of terrain, little bits of broken wall and things that don't go very high, aren't very wide. Now a model may move straight over a low terrain piece provided it's no more than 2 inches wide and that it's no more than half the height of the model. If the terrain is wider or higher than half the model's height, then it counts as difficult terrain and you'd have to roll to move across it. If two models are in base contact with a low terrain piece on opposite sides from each other, they can attack one another as if they were in base contact with each other, provided the terrain piece is no more than 2 inches wide and no more than half the height of the attacking model. So you might get a situation where a tall model could hit a smaller model over a low terrain piece, but the little model couldn't hit back. I'd probably suggest running away at that point. Alright, jumping. A model can jump down from a higher level to a lower level or across a gap. To jump, you have to take a nimbleness roll off. The target number that you have to beat is the distance jumped in inches. So say you were trying to jump 3 inches, then you've got to beat a 3 with your nimbleness roll off. If you succeed, your character's landed safely but can't move any further. But if they've landed in base contact with the model, they could make an attack action. If you fail your roll off, then you've fallen. Falling. If a model suffers any wounds while within 1 inches of an edge, or if they're on a vertical surface, there's a chance that they'll slip and fall off. Take a nimbleness roll off against a target of 3. For taking wounds on an edge, it's always a target of 3. If the roll's equal to or lower than the target, then the character falls over the edge to the ground and will take damage. Also, as we said a moment ago, if a character fails a jumping roll off, they also fall and take damage. Now a character who falls suffers a number of wounds equal to the height of the fall in inches. Any tough skill modifiers gained from armour don't apply to wounds sustained by falling, so any tough skills your character's got naturally will be removed from the wounds, but any applied by armour don't count. So when you're falling, you take a number of wounds equal to the distance you've fallen in inches. Flying. Some characters, such as birds, raptors and bats, have the flight skill, which means they can move by flying. So what does the flight skill let them do? Well, they can move 12 inches per move rather than using their movement statistic, and they can ignore all difficult terrain and may pass directly over any models or terrain that are in their path. So it's a very useful skill. The downside is that you cannot use weapons or shields for the rest of the turn if you choose to move by flight. You may attack unarmed, and you can defend yourself unarmed. Now, a character cannot use flight if they're carrying any scenario-specific items, such as treasure counters or a pay chest, anything that's mentioned in a scenario as an objective you've got to move. You can't do that with flight. You also cannot fly if you're wearing very heavy armour or carrying a heavy shield, but other than that, it's a very useful skill to have. Well, that covers basically the rules for movement. In our next video, we'll start having a look at the different actions a character can perform. Thank you for watching.